r/ProRevenge coworker sabotaged my promotion, so I exposed his lies to the entire office. The conference room fell silent except for the hum of the projector as Jake clicked to his final slide, flashing that $1 million smile that had fooled me for the past 18 months. And that's why I believe the Tech Forward campaign resonated so strongly with our target demographic, he said, basking in the approving nods from upper management. My stomach twisted into knots. Those were my words. My strategy. My late nights researching consumer behavior patterns and demographic data. My campaign that had increased our quarterly engagement by 340%. Excellent work, Jake, Director Sarah Martinez beamed. This kind of innovative thinking is exactly what we need in our next team leader. I forced my face into a neutral expression, but inside I was screaming. 6 months ago, I pitched that exact campaign concept to Jake over coffee, excited to bounce ideas off someone I trusted. He'd seemed genuinely interested, asking thoughtful questions about my research methodology and target audience analysis. I'd even sent him my preliminary notes afterward, thinking we were collaborating as friends. Now here he was, presenting my work as his own breakthrough moment. Any questions for Jake before we wrap up? Sarah asked the room. I raised my hand slightly, my heart hammering. The demographic research was really thorough. Where did you source those consumer behavior insights? Jake's smile never wavered, but I caught the microsecond of panic that flashed across his eyes. Oh, you know, various industry reports. Standard market analysis stuff. He waved dismissively. Nothing too revolutionary. Nothing too revolutionary. The research that had taken me 3 weeks of evenings and weekends to compile, diving deep into consumer psychology journals and conducting informal focus groups with friends and family. The insights that our competitors were still trying to replicate. Well, Sarah stood up, clearly impressed. I think we've found our next team leader. Jake, congratulations. We'll make the official announcement Monday. The room erupted in polite applause. Jake soaked it up, shaking hands and accepting congratulations like he'd just won an Oscar. When he reached me, he had the audacity to pat my shoulder. Thanks for being such a great team player through all this, he whispered, leaning in close enough that only I could hear. Your support really means everything to me. Support. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Was that what he called it when I'd stayed late helping him prepare his presentations? When I'd covered his client calls during his mysterious dentist appointments? When I'd shared every successful strategy I'd developed, thinking we were building each other up? As the meeting dispersed, I lingered behind, pretending to organize my notes while my mind raced. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. 3 months ago, my client retention strategy had somehow become Jake's innovative approach to customer loyalty. Before that, my social media engagement tactics had transformed into his creative breakthrough in digital marketing. I'd rationalized it each time. Maybe great minds really did think alike. Maybe we both arrived at similar conclusions independently. Maybe I was being paranoid. But watching him accept praise for work that had consumed my life for weeks, seeing him positioned for the promotion I'd been working toward for over a year, I finally understood what was happening. Jake wasn't my friend. He wasn't even my colleague. He was a parasite, and I'd been his perfect host. I gathered my things slowly, my hands steady despite the fury building in my chest. Jake had made one critical mistake in his little performance today. He'd gotten cocky, and cocky people make errors. It was time to start paying attention to those errors. The next morning, I arrived at the office 40 minutes early, clutching my coffee like a lifeline. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I settled at my desk, watching the empty cubicles slowly fill with my unsuspecting coworkers. Everyone was buzzing about Jake's promotion, and I had to endure a parade of colleagues stopping by to share their thoughts. Can you believe Jake got team leader, whispered Melissa from accounting, perching on the edge of my desk. I mean, he's nice and all, but didn't you have way more experience with those big campaigns? I managed a tight smile. Jake's very talented. The words felt like swallowing glass, but I needed to be careful. If I was going to expose what Jake had done, I couldn't afford to look like a bitter, passed-over employee spreading gossip. Around 10 a.m., Jake strutted over to my cubicle, radiating the confidence of someone who'd just stolen their way to the top. He'd already started dressing the part, expensive button-down, sleeves rolled up just so, like he'd stepped out of a LinkedIn success story. Hey there, superstar, he said, loud enough for nearby coworkers to hear. I wanted to talk to you about the team restructuring. As the new leader, I'm going to need someone reliable to handle the foundational work while I focus on strategy and client relations. Foundational work. The audacity was breathtaking. Of course, I replied evenly. I'm happy to support the team however I can. That's what I love about you, always willing to do the grunt work. He leaned against my desk, speaking quieter now. Between you and me, Sarah mentioned that upper management had some concerns about your presentation skills. Nothing major, just that you might be better suited for behind-the-scenes support rather than client-facing leadership. My blood turned to ice water. Sarah said that. Don't take it personally. We all have our strengths. Yours is definitely the detailed research stuff, you know, the boring parts that need to get done but don't require much creativity. Each word was a calculated strike. Jake wasn't just stealing credit for my work, he was actively poisoning my reputation with management. How long had this been going on? What other lies had he been spreading? I appreciate you being honest with me, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Always, buddy. That's what friends are for. After he walked away, I sat motionless for several minutes, processing the full scope of his manipulation. This wasn't just opportunistic credit stealing, it was a systematic campaign to undermine my career while elevating his own. I opened my laptop and began documenting everything I could remember. Every idea I'd shared with Jake. Every late night I'd helped him prepare. Every time my work had mysteriously transformed into his breakthrough moment. I created a private folder on my personal cloud drive and started building a timeline. That afternoon, I decided to test a theory. During our weekly team meeting, I casually mentioned a fake campaign idea, something about leveraging micro-influencer partnerships for authentic brand storytelling. I made sure Jake was listening, even sent him a follow-up email with fabricated metrics and research citations. This could be huge for our Q4 strategy, I wrote. Let me know if you want to brainstorm further. Jake responded within an hour, interesting concept. Let me think about how we could develop this further. Perfect. Now I just had to wait and see if my fake idea would somehow become Jake's next revolutionary strategy. If it did, I'd have proof that he was stealing my work. Real, undeniable proof. But as I hit send on a second email with even more detailed fake research, a chilling thought occurred to me. If Jake had been sabotaging me this systematically, who else knew about it? And more importantly, who else was helping him? The answer to my question came faster than I expected, and it hit like a punch to the gut. 2 days after sending Jake my fake micro-influencer campaign idea, I was grabbing lunch from the break room refrigerator when I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. Told you Jake was leadership material from day one, came the unmistakable voice of Tom Brennan, our senior project manager. Unlike some people who talk a big game but can't deliver when it counts. I froze, hidden behind the open refrigerator door, recognizing the second voice as David Chen from the creative team. You mean the coordinator position? David asked. I thought they were pretty solid. Those campaign metrics were impressive. Tom scoffed. Jake's the one who actually developed those strategies. The other one just handled the busy work, data entry, scheduling meetings, that kind of thing. Jake was telling me how he had to practically hold their hand through the whole process. My sandwich fell from my numb fingers back onto the shelf. Jake hadn't just been stealing credit with management, he'd been rewriting history with our colleagues too. How many of these conversations had happened? How many people now believed I was just Jake's incompetent sidekick? Really? David sounded surprised. That's not the impression I got. Jake's too nice to throw anyone under the bus publicly, Tom continued, and I had to grip the refrigerator handle to keep from screaming. But between you and me, Sarah's been getting reports about missed deadlines, sloppy research, unreliable communication. That's why the promotion was such an obvious choice. Reports. Plural. My mind raced. What missed deadlines? What sloppy research? I'd never missed a single deadline in 3 years at this company. My performance reviews had been consistently excellent until recently, when suddenly Sarah had started making comments about attention to detail and follow-through. I'd assumed it was normal pre-promotion scrutiny. Now I realized it was something much worse. As their footsteps faded down the hallway, I remained frozen in place, pieces clicking together with horrifying clarity. The client meeting last month where Jake had apologized to everyone for my miscommunication about the timeline, except I'd never communicated anything. The week when 3 different people had asked me about a report I'd supposedly promised to deliver, a report I'd never heard of. The morning when Sarah had seemed annoyed that I hadn't followed up on action items from a meeting I hadn't even attended. Jake hadn't just been stealing my ideas. He'd been systematically destroying my credibility, creating a fictional narrative of incompetence and unreliability. Every helpful suggestion I'd given him, every late night I'd stayed to help with his projects, every moment of trust, he'd weaponized all of it. But Tom's involvement added a terrifying new dimension. Tom had been with the company for 8 years. He had Sarah's ear, influence with the executive team, relationships I couldn't compete with. If he was actively supporting Jake's lies. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my recent emails, looking for anything suspicious. There it was, a message from Tom 2 weeks ago asking me to confirm the status of deliverables for a client I'd never worked with. I'd responded that there must be some mistake, that those weren't my projects. At the time, his reply had seemed like a simple mix-up, thanks for clarifying. Jake mentioned you were handling these, but I must have misunderstood. Now I saw it for what it really was, a trap. Jake had told Tom I was responsible for work I'd never agreed to do, knowing I'd have to admit I wasn't handling it. In Tom's eyes, it probably looked like I was dropping balls and making excuses. How many of these landmines had they planted? How long had this conspiracy been building while I'd been blind to it? I closed the refrigerator door and walked back to my desk on unsteady legs, my mind spinning with the implications. This wasn't just workplace sabotage anymore. This was character assassination, and I was apparently fighting a war I hadn't even known existed. That evening, I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop screen, the cursor blinking mockingly in my evidence document. What had started as a simple timeline was now a sprawling investigation into months of manipulation. But the more I uncovered, the more I realized how deep this went. I pulled up my email archive and started searching for every interaction with Jake over the past year. The patterns were sickening once you knew what to look for. The way he'd always volunteered to help present my ideas to management. How he'd insisted on being the point of contact for clients on campaigns I developed. The subtle ways he positioned himself as the creative force while relegating me to research support. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. How's the promotion thing going? Mom's been bragging to the neighbors about her marketing executive daughter faced with tears of joy. I stared at the message, my throat tightening. How was I supposed to explain that not only had I lost the promotion, but my career was being systematically dismantled by someone I trusted? That everything I'd worked for was crumbling because I'd been naive enough to believe in workplace friendship. Before I could spiral further, my laptop chimed with a new email. My stomach dropped when I saw the sender, Sarah Martinez. Subject, Monday check-in. Hi there. Asterisk, I wanted to schedule some time Monday morning to discuss your role moving forward under Jake's leadership. There are some performance concerns we need to address, and I think it would be beneficial to set clearer expectations for your position, asterisk. Best. Sarah. Performance concerns. My hands were shaking as I read it again. What performance concerns? My metrics were solid, my client feedback was positive, and until recently, Sarah had never mentioned any issues with my work. I clicked through to my sent items and found my last 3 project reports. Everything looked normal, detailed analysis, clear recommendations, measurable results. So where were these mysterious performance issues coming from? The answer hit me like a freight train. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Marcus, a friend from college who now worked in IT at a different company. If Jake was sabotaging me through official channels, there might be digital evidence. Marcus. It's urgent. I need to know about email recall features and message editing in corporate systems. 20 minutes later, I had my answer. In our company's system, team leaders could recall and edit certain internal communications within 48 hours. They could also access draft folders and modify documents in shared drives. Jake had been the interim team coordinator for 2 months while Sarah was handling the restructuring. He'd had elevated access privileges. My blood ran cold as I realized what this meant. How many of my emails had Jake corrected before they reached Sarah? How many of my reports had been subtly modified to include errors or remove key insights? How many times had my professional communication been edited to make me look incompetent? I logged into our shared project drive with trembling fingers, checking the revision history on my recent campaign documents. There it was, modifications made to 3 of my reports, all timestamped after I'd submitted them, all traced back to Jake's user account. In my original Q3 analysis, I'd recommended a 15% budget increase for digital advertising. The version Sarah had seen suggested a 150% increase, making me look either careless with numbers or completely out of touch with realistic budgets. My competitive analysis for the Morrison client had been altered to include outdated information and incorrect market data. No wonder Sarah had seemed disappointed during our last client meeting. Every change was surgical, subtle enough to look like my mistakes rather than deliberate sabotage. Jake hadn't just been stealing my ideas, he'd been editing my work to make me look incompetent while using the good parts for his own presentations. I screenshotted everything, saving the evidence to my personal cloud drive. But as I documented each violation, a new fear crept in. If Jake could manipulate documents and emails, what else could he control? Our project management system. Client communications. My calendar. I pulled up Monday's schedule and felt my heart stop. According to the system, I was supposed to be in 3 different meetings simultaneously, including one with a client I'd never worked with and another for a project that had been completed months ago. Jake wasn't just destroying my past, he was sabotaging my future too. The weekend crawled by in a haze of paranoia and planning. I printed out every piece of evidence I could find, creating a physical backup that Jake couldn't digitally manipulate. My coffee table looked like a conspiracy theorist's den, screenshots, email printouts, timeline charts, all connected by red string in my mind if not literally. But Sunday night brought a terrifying realization, I had no idea how high this went. I was reviewing my evidence for the 100th time when my phone rang. The caller ID made my stomach lurch. It was Priya from HR, calling at 9 p.m. on a Sunday. "Hi, I'm sorry to bother you so late," Priya's voice sounded strained. "I need you to come in early tomorrow. Before your meeting with Sarah. There's been a situation." "What kind of situation?" "I can't discuss it over the phone. Can you be here at 7 a.m.? Conference room B." The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in growing dread. HR didn't call on Sunday nights for positive reasons. Something had happened, and the timing felt like another chess move in Jake's game. I barely slept, running through every possible scenario. By 6:30 a.m., I was pacing outside the office building, my evidence folder clutched against my chest like armor. When Priya finally unlocked the doors, her expression confirmed my worst fears. "We received some concerning reports about your conduct," she said without preamble, leading me to the conference room. "Anonymous complaints filed through our ethics hotline." My blood turned to ice. "What kind of complaints?" She opened a thin manila folder, avoiding eye contact. "Accusations of taking credit for colleagues' work. Manipulating project timelines to make team members look bad. Inappropriate access to confidential client information." I felt like I was falling through the floor. That's not true. Any of it. There are also allegations about falsifying research data and misrepresenting campaign results to management. Every accusation was a twisted mirror image of what Jake had actually done to me. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. He'd literally filed complaints accusing me of his own crimes. "Priya, I have evidence that." "I need you to understand the seriousness of these allegations," she interrupted. "We're required to investigate any ethics violations thoroughly. Until this is resolved, you're being placed on administrative suspension." Suspension? The word hit me like a physical blow. "You're suspending me based on anonymous accusations. It's temporary, just until we can conduct a full investigation. You'll need to surrender your badge and company laptop." This was it. Jake's endgame. He'd systematically destroyed my reputation, manipulated my work, and now he was having me removed from the building entirely. By the time any investigation concluded, he'd be firmly established in his leadership role, and I'd be the disgraced former employee who tried to bring down the golden boy with desperate lies. How many complaints were filed? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. 4 separate reports over the past 2 weeks. 4. Jake hadn't just filed one complaint, he'd created an entire campaign of accusations, probably using different email addresses or enlisting his allies like Tom. It would look like multiple colleagues had independently raised concerns about my behavior. I need to see those reports. I have a right to know what I'm being accused of specifically. Priya's uncomfortable silence spoke volumes. The details will be shared during the formal investigation process. Which meant they probably contained information only Jake could have provided, twisted versions of conversations we had in private, confidential project details that would make the accusations seem credible. As I handed over my badge and laptop, my mind raced. Jake had effectively banished me from the building, cut off my access to evidence, and poisoned the well with HR. Even if I could prove my innocence eventually, the damage to my reputation would be permanent. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated how much evidence I'd already gathered, and he had no idea I'd discovered his digital manipulations. More importantly, he didn't know about the fake micro-influencer campaign I'd sent him, the one that didn't exist anywhere except in his stolen emails. Walking out of the office building with my cardboard box of personal items, I felt strangely calm for the first time in weeks. Jake thought he'd won by having me removed from the game. He had no idea he'd just freed me to play by my own rules. The silence in my apartment was deafening. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't checking work emails or prepping for morning meetings. Instead, I sat surrounded by evidence printouts, plotting my next move like some corporate spy thriller protagonist. But reality hit when my phone started buzzing with concerned texts from coworkers who'd heard about my sudden departure. The official story was already spreading. I'd been placed on administrative leave pending investigation into workplace conduct issues. Jake's version would be making the rounds by lunch. I was drafting a careful response to Melissa's worried message when my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello. Is this the marketing coordinator from Innovate Tech? The voice was professional, unfamiliar. Who's asking? My name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm a recruiter at Morrison Dynamics. We've been following some of the innovative campaigns coming out of your company, particularly the Tech Forward initiative that impressed our leadership team. My stomach clenched. Morrison Dynamics was our biggest competitor. I'm not sure I can help you. We'd love to discuss bringing the architect of that campaign over to our team. The strategic thinking was remarkable, exactly the kind of forward momentum we're looking for in our new marketing director position. Marketing director. At Morrison Dynamics, that would mean a 40% salary increase and actual creative control. It should have been thrilling. Instead, it was devastating. I appreciate the call, I managed, but I think you want to speak with Jake Morrison. He's the new team leader at Innovate Tech. Jake Morrison. No, our intel specifically identified you as the campaign strategist. Are you saying you weren't the primary developer? Intel. They had specific information about who really created the campaign. Someone had told them the truth about my work, which meant Jake's lies hadn't fooled everyone. It's complicated, I said carefully. These things usually are. Would you be interested in an informal coffee meeting? Tomorrow afternoon. After I hung up, my mind was spinning. Morrison Dynamics wanted to poach me specifically, not Jake. They knew who'd really created the successful campaigns. But if I took a meeting while under investigation, it could look like I was jumping ship because I was guilty of something. Worse, if Jake found out, and he would find out, because corporate recruiting news traveled fast, it would give him ammunition to claim I'd been planning to steal company secrets all along. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a LinkedIn message from someone named Alex Chen at TechCrunch. Asterisk hi. Working on a story about innovative marketing campaigns in mid-sized tech companies. The Tech Forward campaign caught our attention as a standout example. Would love to chat about the strategy behind it. Are you available for a brief interview this week? Asterisk. TechCrunch wanted to interview me about Jake's stolen campaign. The irony was suffocating. But then a dangerous idea started forming. What if I said yes? What if I gave that interview and told the real story, with evidence? Tech journalism thrived on exposing corporate fraud and workplace toxicity. A story about systematic campaign theft and reputation sabotage would be exactly the kind of scandal that got shared across industry networks. Jake wanted to control the narrative. Fine. But he'd never considered what would happen if the narrative escaped the confines of our small company altogether. I was reaching for my laptop when another complication crashed into my plans. My doorbell rang, and through the peephole I saw a face that made my blood pressure spike. Tom Brennan stood on my doorstep, looking uncharacteristically nervous. We need to talk, he said when I opened the door. About Jake. Every instinct screamed not to let him in. Tom was part of Jake's conspiracy, the one who'd been spreading lies about my performance. But his demeanor was completely different from the confident manager I'd overheard in the break room. I don't think that's a good idea, Tom. Please. His voice cracked slightly. I know how this looks, but there are things you don't understand. Things about Jake that I should have told someone a long time ago. Despite my better judgment, I stepped aside. Tom entered like he was walking into enemy territory, his usual swagger completely absent. You were right to be suspicious, he said without preamble. Jake's been manipulating situations for months, but it's worse than you know. He didn't just steal your ideas. My heart started hammering. What are you talking about? Tom's hands were shaking as he pulled out his phone. He's been recording conversations. Private meetings with Sarah, client calls, even casual break room discussions. He's got dirt on half the management team. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Recording conversations. That's how he knew exactly what lies to tell, exactly which buttons to push. He's been building leverage on everyone, not just you. Tom's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And I think he's planning to use it. The blood drained from my face as Tom's words sank in. What kind of leverage? Tom glanced around my apartment like he expected Jake to materialize from the shadows. Sarah's divorce proceedings. David's side consulting work that violates his contract. Melissa's issues with the Johnson account budget. He paused, swallowing hard. My gambling problem that I've been hiding from my wife. Jesus, Tom. He approached me 3 months ago. Said he'd noticed some irregularities in my expense reports, casino charges disguised as client dinners. Offered to help me clean things up in exchange for supporting his promotion candidacy. Tom's voice was hollow. I thought I was just agreeing to put in a good word. I didn't realize he wanted me to actively sabotage you. My mind reeled. Jake hadn't just been stealing credit and spreading lies, he'd been running a full-scale blackmail operation. How many people is he controlling? At least 6 that I know of. Maybe more. Tom pulled up something on his phone, then hesitated. He's got a whole system. Voice recordings, screenshot evidence, documented violations. He calls it his insurance policy. Insurance against what? Getting caught. Tom's laugh was bitter. He told me that if anyone ever tried to expose him, he'd burn the whole company down. Take everyone with him. The scope of Jake's operation was staggering. This wasn't just workplace sabotage, it was corporate terrorism. He'd systematically compromised key employees, turning them into unwilling accomplices while positioning himself as untouchable. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Tom finally met my eyes, and I saw genuine shame there. Because I heard about the ethics complaints. The suspension. And I realized he's not going to stop with the promotion. He took a shaky breath. Sarah's been asking questions about budget discrepancies. Jake thinks she's getting too close to discovering some of the financial irregularities he's been covering up. What financial irregularities? Client billing anomalies. Project budget transfers. Money that went missing during the Morrison campaign, your campaign. Tom's hands were trembling now. He's been skimming funds and making it look like accounting errors. Small amounts across multiple projects, but it adds up. Jake had been embezzling. On top of everything else, he was literally stealing money from the company while destroying my career to cover his tracks. Sarah doesn't know about the recordings, Tom continued. None of us were supposed to know either, but Jake got careless last week. Left his laptop open during a client call, and I saw the files. What files? Tom showed me his phone screen, a blurry photo of Jake's desktop. I could make out folder names, Sarah_calls, David_consulting, budget_conversations. My stomach lurched when I spotted coordinator_evidence at the bottom of the list. He's been recording me too. 4 months. Every private conversation, every strategy session where you shared ideas. He's got documentation of everything he's stolen, but positioned to make it look like you were feeding him information voluntarily. The full picture was crystallizing, and it was worse than I'd imagined. Jake hadn't just been opportunistically stealing, he'd been building an elaborate frame job. If anyone questioned his sudden creative breakthrough, he had hours of recordings that could be edited to support his version of events. There's something else, Tom said quietly. The promotion isn't his endgame. Sarah's been talking about early retirement, and Jake thinks he's positioned to take over as director when she leaves. Director. That would give Jake control over the entire marketing department, access to major budgets, and the power to permanently bury anyone who threatened him. We have to stop him, I said. How? He's got insurance policies on all of us. The moment anyone tries to expose him, he destroys everyone. I finished the thought, understanding the trap completely. Tom nodded grimly. He's untouchable as long as he has those recordings. But as I stared at the evidence scattered across my coffee table, a new plan started forming. Jake's insurance policy was also his weakness. If I could turn his own weapons against him. Tom, I said slowly, I need you to get me a copy of those files. Tom's face went white as paper. Are you insane? If Jake finds out I accessed his files, he'll destroy me. My wife, my kids, they'll lose everything when he exposes the gambling. He's going to destroy you anyway, I said, surprised by the steel in my own voice. You think he's going to keep you around as a loose end once he gets what he wants? You know too much. Tom started pacing my small living room like a caged animal. You don't understand. He's got recordings of me discussing the expense report issues. Audio of me agreeing to support his initiatives. If that gets out. It's already out, Tom. He's been feeding Sarah information about everyone's performance issues, including yours. How long before he decides you're more valuable as a scapegoat than an ally? I could see the moment reality hit him. His shoulders sagged as the fight drained out of his body. God, what have I done? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Heard you're having some workplace difficulties. Coffee tomorrow? We should talk. Jake. Somehow he'd gotten my personal number. He knows, Tom whispered, staring at my phone screen. Jesus Christ, he knows I'm here. I felt cold dread wash over me, but forced myself to think clearly. How could he know? Did you tell anyone you were coming here? No, but... Tom's voice trailed off as he pulled out his phone, checking something. His face went gray. My location services. I forgot to turn them off after our team building event last month. We were all supposed to share locations for the scavenger hunt. Jake had been tracking Tom's movements. Which meant he knew exactly how long Tom had been at my apartment, and he could probably guess why. We need to assume he heard everything, I said, my mind racing through the implications. Which means he knows we're onto the recordings. Which means he's going to accelerate whatever timeline he had planned. Tom sank into my couch, head in his hands. We're completely screwed. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Sarah Martinez. Don't answer it, Tom said frantically. Whatever Jake told her. But I was already swiping to accept. Hello, Sarah. I need you to come in immediately. Her voice was ice-cold professional. There's been a development in your case. It's Sunday night. I'm aware of what day it is. HR received additional evidence this evening that requires immediate attention. Can you be here in an hour? Additional evidence. Jake was moving fast, probably uploading whatever fabricated documentation he'd prepared for exactly this scenario. Of course, I said. I'll be right there. After I hung up, Tom looked like he was going to be sick. He's burning it all down. Tonight. Whatever he's planned, it's happening now. But as I grabbed my jacket and evidence folder, a strange calm settled over me. Jake's desperation meant he was making mistakes, moving too quickly to cover all his tracks. Tom, I need you to do exactly what I say. Go home. Act normal. When Jake contacts you tomorrow, and he will, tell him I seemed panicked and desperate. Tell him I was rambling about conspiracy theories and that you think I'm having some kind of breakdown. What are you going to do? I checked my evidence folder one more time, making sure I had everything I needed. I'm going to give Jake exactly what he wants. Which is... I headed for the door, adrenaline finally overriding fear. A chance to hang himself with his own rope. The office building felt like a mausoleum at 9 p.m. on a Sunday, with only a few scattered lights cutting through the darkness. My footsteps echoed against the marble lobby as I approached the elevator, clutching my evidence folder like it contained nuclear launch codes. Sarah was waiting in her office, but she wasn't alone. Jake sat across from her desk, wearing a perfectly tailored concerned expression that I now recognized as one of his many masks. He stood when I entered, extending his hand like we were old friends meeting for drinks. Hey, I'm so glad you came in, he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Sarah and I have been really worried about you. The audacity was breathtaking. Here he was, sitting in the office of the woman he'd been systematically lying to, playing the role of concerned colleague while orchestrating my professional execution. Please, sit, Sarah said, gesturing to the chair next to Jake. I remained standing. I understand there's been some new evidence, I said carefully. Sarah opened a manila folder that was significantly thicker than the one Priya had shown me that morning. We received several additional reports tonight, along with supporting documentation that frankly, is very concerning. Jake leaned forward slightly, his face a masterpiece of reluctant disappointment. I really didn't want it to come to this, but I felt I had a responsibility to the team. What kind of documentation? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. Sarah pulled out a stack of printed emails. Communications showing a pattern of IP theft, including detailed strategies being shared with outside contacts. She paused, consulting her notes. There's also evidence of attempts to manipulate project timelines and deliberately sabotage team initiatives. My breath caught. Those were my emails, but they'd been altered. I could see fragments of legitimate messages I'd sent to Jake, but the context had been completely twisted. What had been collaborative brainstorming sessions now read like confessions of corporate espionage. Additionally, Sarah continued, we have documented evidence of inappropriate access to confidential client files and attempts to interfere with colleague workflows. Jake's expression was perfectly calibrated, disappointed but not vindictive, more concerned than angry. I kept hoping things would improve, he said quietly. But when I noticed client information being accessed outside of normal project parameters, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The trap was masterful. Every legitimate action I'd taken, researching clients for campaigns, accessing project files I'd been assigned to, sending Jake collaborative emails, had been recontextualized as evidence of wrongdoing. And my suspension meant I couldn't access the original files to prove the timestamps had been manipulated. I'd like to review this documentation myself, I said. I'm afraid that's not possible during an active investigation, Sarah replied. But Jake has agreed to walk us through his concerns, given his first-hand knowledge of the team dynamics. Jake cleared his throat, somehow managing to look both reluctant and dutiful. The thing is, I've been trying to protect everyone involved. But when I noticed irregular patterns in project file access, and then saw communications that suggested confidential information might be shared externally. He trailed off, shaking his head sadly. What external communications? I asked, though ice was forming in my stomach. Sarah consulted her folder again. Email exchanges with Morrison Dynamics, among others. Including detailed campaign strategies and client analysis. My phone calls with a Morrison recruiter. Somehow Jake had found out about them and spun them into evidence of corporate espionage. The timeline was impossible. I'd only spoken to them this afternoon, but in the context of his manufactured evidence, it would look like confirmation of a longer pattern of betrayal. Those were unsolicited recruitment calls, I said. I never shared confidential information with anyone. The documentation suggests otherwise, Sarah said gently. Including timestamped records of file downloads and email forwards that align with these external contacts. Jake had been busy. While Tom and I were talking in my apartment, Jake had been fabricating a complete digital paper trail that painted me as a corporate spy selling company secrets to competitors. Every legitimate action, every normal workplace interaction, twisted into evidence of systematic betrayal. I think, Jake said carefully, we also need to discuss the concerning behavior patterns some team members have reported. The paranoid accusations, the conspiracy theories about colleagues. Tom. Jake was already positioning Tom's visit to my apartment as evidence of my desperation, using his own surveillance to strengthen the narrative that I was a paranoid employee spinning increasingly wild theories to cover my guilt. But as I sat there watching Jake's performance, something clicked into place. His story was too perfect, his evidence too comprehensive, his timeline too convenient. He'd built an elaborate house of cards, but houses of cards had one critical weakness. They collapsed completely when you pulled the right support beam. This is certainly serious, I said, surprising them both with my calm tone. I appreciate you both staying late to address these concerns. Jake, I especially appreciate your diligence in documenting these issues. Jake's micro-expression shifted almost imperceptibly. He'd expected panic, denials, desperate explanations. My acceptance was off-script. I do have one question though, I continued, pulling out my own folder. About the micro-influencer campaign strategy. The color drained from Jake's face so quickly that even Sarah noticed, glancing between us with newfound curiosity. I'm sorry. Jake managed. The micro-influencer partnership strategy. You know, for authentic brand storytelling. I'm curious how that's developing, given everything else that's been going on. Jake's mouth opened and closed without sound. Because the micro-influencer campaign didn't exist. It was the fake strategy I'd sent him to test my theory about his theft, and he'd walked straight into the trap. The house of cards was starting to wobble. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Jake found his voice again. I'm not sure what you're referring to, he said, but sweat was beading at his hairline despite the office's aggressive air conditioning. Oh, you know, I said conversationally, flipping through my folder like I was discussing weekend plans. The campaign strategy one sent you last Tuesday. About leveraging micro-influencer partnerships for Q4. You said you wanted to develop it further. Sarah's eyebrows furrowed as she looked between us. I don't recall seeing any micro-influencer proposals in our Q4 planning documents. Jake's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. We discussed several preliminary concepts. Not all of them made it to the formal planning stage. Right, because this one was still in development, I agreed helpfully. But I'm curious about your thoughts on the authenticity metrics I included. The ones showing 340% engagement improvement through micro-tier partnerships. The trap was beautiful in its simplicity. Jake couldn't admit he didn't know what I was talking about without revealing he'd been stealing my ideas so systematically that he couldn't keep track of what was real anymore. But he also couldn't elaborate on a campaign that existed only in fabricated emails designed to catch him. Perhaps we should focus on the immediate concerns, Jake said, attempting to redirect. Oh, absolutely, I said. Sarah, I'm actually relieved we're having this conversation tonight. Because I've been documenting some very concerning patterns myself. I pulled out my first piece of evidence, the screenshot showing Jake's user account modifying my campaign reports after I'd submitted them. I noticed some discrepancies in my project files. Changes made after submission that I certainly didn't authorize. Sarah took the printout, her expression shifting as she absorbed the timestamp information. These modifications were made to your completed reports. Several of them. Always subtle changes, wrong budget numbers, outdated research data, incorrect client specifications. The kind of errors that would make me look careless or incompetent. I handed her another sheet. But the revision history tells an interesting story about who actually made those changes. Jake's carefully constructed composure was cracking. There could be any number of explanations for system glitches or, I interrupted, producing another document. We could look at the pattern of my campaign strategies appearing in other presentations, with timestamps showing when I originally developed them versus when they were presented as someone else's breakthrough thinking. Sarah was now actively studying my evidence instead of Jake's folder. These are serious allegations. They are, I agreed. But I think the most concerning issue is the systematic manipulation of internal communications. I placed my final piece of evidence on her desk, Tom's blurry photo of Jake's computer screen showing the recording files. Jake shot to his feet like he'd been electrocuted. That's completely fabricated. Anyone could create fake screenshots. Then I'm sure you won't mind if we verify the contents of your computer, I said calmly. Specifically the folders labeled with colleagues' names and confidential meeting recordings. The mask finally slipped completely. Jake's face twisted with rage before he caught himself, but Sarah had seen it. The concerned colleague act was over, and the predator underneath was showing through. I think, Sarah said slowly, we need to expand this investigation significantly. She was already reaching for her phone. And I think we need IT security involved immediately. Jake's eyes darted between us like a cornered animal. I could practically see him calculating his options, deny everything and hope his fabricated evidence held up, or activate his nuclear option and try to destroy everyone with his blackmail material. Sarah, he said, his voice taking on a desperate edge, there are things about this company, about certain people's activities, that you might not want exposed during a formal investigation. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Sarah's hand froze halfway to her phone as she processed the implication. Jake's insurance policy was about to come into play. But Sarah's reaction wasn't what Jake expected. Instead of backing down, her expression hardened with the cold fury of someone who'd just been openly threatened. Are you suggesting, she said in a voice that could freeze helium, that you have inappropriate information about company personnel that you're willing to use as leverage? Jake realized his mistake immediately, but it was too late to backpedal. I'm just saying that investigations can uncover things that hurt innocent people. Stop talking. Sarah's command cut through his scrambling explanation like a blade. She picked up her desk phone and dialed a 3-digit extension. Security. I need someone in my office immediately. And get me IT on the line. The color drained from Jake's face as he understood that his threats had backfired spectacularly. He just confessed to having blackmail material on company employees directly to the one person who could authorize a full forensic investigation. Sarah, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding was mine, she said, not looking at him as she gathered up my evidence. I understood you to be a trustworthy employee. That was clearly an error in judgment. My phone buzzed with a text, and my heart nearly stopped when I saw it was from Tom. Jake's computer is remotely wiping files. Now. He's destroying everything. Jake was triggering his contingency plan. While we were sitting here, he was probably using his phone to execute some kind of digital scorched earth protocol. In minutes, all the evidence of his blackmail operation would be gone. Sarah, I said urgently, he's deleting files right now. We need IT to freeze his accounts immediately. Jake's hand moved toward his pocket, presumably to his phone, but Sarah was faster. Security will escort you to a conference room where you'll wait until this is resolved, she told him. You won't be accessing any electronic devices. You can't confiscate my personal property. Watch me. Sarah's voice carried the authority of someone who'd been managing corporate crises longer than Jake had been alive. Either you cooperate fully with this investigation, or I call the police and let them sort out what constitutes potential evidence of criminal activity. The word criminal hit Jake like a physical blow. His embezzlement scheme wasn't just a firing offense, it was felony theft. And if his recordings had captured anything sensitive enough, he could be looking at industrial espionage charges. Heavy footsteps in the hallway announced the arrival of building security. 2 guards entered, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else than dealing with corporate drama on a Sunday night. Mr. Morrison needs to be escorted to conference room C, Sarah instructed. He's not to have access to any computers, phones, or other electronic devices until further notice. As the security guards flanked him, Jake made one last desperate play. This is all fabricated evidence from a disgruntled employee who's facing termination, he said, his voice rising. She's been planning this because she couldn't handle losing the promotion. Jake. My voice cut through his panic with surprising steadiness. The micro-influencer campaign. He stopped mid-sentence, understanding flooding his features. The fake campaign was the thread that would unravel everything once IT examined our email exchanges. He'd responded to non-existent research, commented on fabricated metrics, and worst of all, he'd probably already started incorporating elements into his future strategy presentations. You set me up, he whispered. You set yourself up, I replied. I just gave you the rope. As security escorted Jake from the office, his parting look was pure venom. But there was something else there too, calculation. Even cornered and exposed, he was still planning something. That should have been my first warning about what he'd do next. The aftermath of Jake's removal should have felt like victory, but as Sarah and I waited for IT to arrive, a gnawing anxiety settled in my stomach. Something about Jake's final look, that calculating gleam behind the rage, suggested this wasn't over. How long have you suspected? Sarah asked, reviewing my evidence with a methodical precision that had made her one of the company's most respected directors. Consciously. About a week. But looking back, there were red flags for months. I pulled out my timeline document. The pattern became clear once I started documenting everything systematically. Sarah nodded grimly. The modified reports alone constitute grounds for immediate termination. The potential embezzlement makes it a legal matter. She paused, studying the screenshot of Jake's recording folders. But this surveillance operation, this is something else entirely. My phone buzzed with another text from Tom. IT froze his main accounts, but he had backup systems. Some files definitely got deleted. Also, check your email. Something's happening. I pulled up my personal email on my phone, and my blood turned to ice. There were 17 new messages, all from different company addresses, all with the same subject line, evidence of corporate espionage. Sarah, we have a problem. She looked over as I scrolled through the emails. Each one contained the same attachment, a compilation document titled Pattern of Industrial Theft and Sabotage. Jake had just mass distributed his fabricated evidence to the entire management team, HR, and half the senior staff. He's trying to control the narrative, I said, my mind racing. If people see his version first, before the real investigation results. Sarah was already dialing her phone. Legal department, emergency line, she explained, then spoke into the receiver. This is Sarah Martinez. I need our crisis management protocol activated immediately. We have a potential corporate sabotage situation with fraudulent communications being distributed to staff. But even as she coordinated damage control, I realized Jake's final gambit was more sophisticated than just spreading lies. My phone was now buzzing with LinkedIn notifications, connection requests from reporters, industry contacts, even competitors. Somehow, word about the corporate espionage case was already leaking beyond our company walls. He's weaponizing the scandal, I said, watching notifications pile up in real time. Even if we prove he fabricated everything, the story becomes about our internal security failures and workplace toxicity. Sarah's expression darkened as she understood the implications. Morrison Dynamics called you because they'd heard about your successful campaigns. If this gets spun as industrial espionage, they'll assume I was already selling information. My reputation in the industry gets destroyed regardless of what our internal investigation finds. The genius of Jake's scorched earth strategy was becoming clear. He couldn't save his own career at this point, but he could ensure mine was destroyed too. And if the company's reputation suffered enough, it would validate his narrative that he'd been trying to protect everyone from a rogue employee. Sarah's phone rang, and her face went pale as she answered. When? How many outlets? Jesus Christ. She hung up and turned to me with barely controlled panic. TechCrunch just published a breaking news alert about corporate espionage allegations rock mid-sized tech firm. They're naming our company specifically. My hands went numb. Alex Chen, the journalist who'd wanted to interview me about the Tech Forward campaign, had apparently gotten a very different story fed to him. Jake must have contacted him with the fabricated evidence, positioning himself as a whistleblower exposing corporate theft. There's more, Sarah continued. 3 other industry publications received anonymous tips tonight about the story. Someone's been working media contacts for hours. Jake hadn't just prepared his digital evidence and blackmail files. He'd cultivated relationships with tech journalists, probably feeding them legitimate scoops over time to build credibility. When he needed to deploy his nuclear option, he had a ready-made network to spread his lies at unprecedented speed. My phone rang. Unknown number, but the area code looked familiar. Don't answer that, Sarah warned, but I was already accepting the call. This is Rebecca Torres from Tech Daily, came a sharp, professional voice. I'm calling about the corporate espionage allegations involving your company. Do you have any comment on your role in the alleged theft of proprietary campaign strategies? The story had already evolved beyond just internal scandal. I was now being positioned as the face of corporate espionage in the tech marketing world. And Jake was just getting started. The Tech Daily reporter was still talking, but her words faded into background noise as the full scope of Jake's destruction became clear. He hadn't just sabotaged my career, he turned me into a cautionary tale that would follow me for years. No comment, I managed, hanging up before she could press further. Sarah was frantically typing on her laptop while fielding calls from what sounded like increasingly panicked executives. Legal wants an emergency meeting at midnight, she said between calls. The board is being briefed at 6 a.m. And HR needs a complete timeline of events before morning. My phone buzzed with a call from my sister. Then my mom. Then 3 former colleagues from previous jobs, all probably seeing the news alerts and wondering what the hell had happened to me. Each unanswered call felt like another door slamming shut on my future. But something Tom had said earlier was nagging at me. Jake's backup systems. He'd been too thorough, too prepared for this exact scenario. Which meant, Sarah, we need to check the company's external communications. Client emails, vendor contacts, anyone Jake had legitimate business relationships with. She paused mid-conversation with legal. What are you thinking? He's been planning this nuclear option for months. If he's been cultivating journalists as backup allies, what else has he been preparing? I pulled up LinkedIn on my phone, searching for Jake's profile. Look at his recent connection activity. Sarah leaned over as I scrolled through Jake's network. In the past 3 months, he'd connected with reporters, industry analysts, competitor executives, and even former employees from our company who'd left under less than ideal circumstances. He's been building a coalition, I said, the pieces clicking together. People who already have reasons to distrust our company, journalists looking for scoops, competitors who'd love to see us implode. You think this goes beyond tonight? Before I could answer, Sarah's email chimed with a high-priority message. Her face went ashen as she read it. What now? Morrison Dynamics just issued a statement distancing themselves from any individuals currently under investigation for corporate espionage. They're specifically declining to comment on recent recruitment approaches. The job opportunity, gone. Jake's media blitz had been precisely targeted to destroy not just my current position, but any potential escape routes. Morrison's public statement would be seen as confirmation that the allegations had merit. There's more, Sarah continued reading. They're suggesting other companies exercise appropriate caution regarding personnel from organizations currently experiencing security breaches. It was corporate blacklisting in real time. Jake had weaponized the industry's interconnectedness against me, turning my own success into evidence of guilt. Every campaign I'd worked on, every client relationship I'd built, every professional achievement was now being recontextualized as potential industrial espionage. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number, check your front door. Jay. Ice flooded my veins. Jake was having me watched. Even in police custody, if he was even in custody, he had people monitoring my movements. Sarah, I need to leave. Right now. You can't just. He knows where I live. He's been tracking people's locations, remember? I was already grabbing my evidence folder and jacket. If he's desperate enough to orchestrate all this, what else might he do? Sarah's phone rang again, and this time her expression shifted to something close to terror. That was building security downstairs. Someone just tried to access the building using Jake's keycard. Multiple attempts in the past 10 minutes. Either Jake had escaped somehow, or he had accomplices we didn't know about. People who were still actively trying to get access to evidence, files, or worse, to us. We're both leaving, Sarah declared, shutting her laptop. My car, right now. Legal can brief us remotely. As we rushed toward the elevator, my mind raced through the implications. Jake's operation had been more extensive than any of us realized. The recordings, the blackmail, the media contacts, the surveillance, it was all infrastructure for exactly this kind of scorched earth finale. But the attempted building access meant something else. Jake wasn't done. Whatever his endgame was, tonight's exposure had only forced him to accelerate his timeline. The elevator doors closed with a soft ding, and I realized we weren't just dealing with workplace sabotage anymore. We were dealing with something much more dangerous. The parking garage felt like a tomb as Sarah and I hurried toward her car, our footsteps echoing off concrete walls. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat, every noise made us both jump. Sarah's hands shook as she fumbled with her keys. Get in, she muttered, clicking the unlock button repeatedly. I was reaching for the passenger door handle when Sarah's phone exploded with notifications, dozens of alerts in rapid succession. Her face went white as she scrolled through them. What is it? The company email system is being flooded. Hundreds of messages going out to our entire client database. Her voice cracked. Jake still has access to something. I peered over her shoulder at the email preview, urgent, security breach notification, potential compromise of client data. The message was professionally formatted, using official company letterhead, and appeared to be warning clients that their confidential information might have been stolen by a rogue employee. Me. It was warning them about me. This is catastrophic, Sarah breathed. If clients think we've had a major security breach, they'll terminate contracts immediately, I finished. And with my name specifically mentioned. Every client would assume I was the security risk. Jake wasn't just destroying my reputation, he was leveraging client relationships to make his lies feel validated. When our biggest account started canceling contracts tomorrow, it would look like the market was confirming his accusations. Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed our CEO's name. Richard, she answered, putting it on speaker as she started the car. We're dealing with it. Sarah, what the hell is happening? Richard's voice was strained beyond recognition. I've got board members calling me at home, reporters blowing up the main line, and now clients demanding emergency meetings. Tell me this is some kind of mistake. It's complicated. We've discovered systematic fraud and I don't care about systematic anything. I care about the fact that our stock price is going to crater when the market opens tomorrow. TechCrunch is running a follow-up story about our culture of corporate espionage, and 3 major clients have already sent termination notices. 3 clients. In the span of 2 hours, Jake had managed to inflict potentially millions in damage to the company. His revenge wasn't just personal, it was financial warfare. Richard, the employee in question, has been fabricating evidence and the employee in question needs to disappear from this story immediately. Legal is recommending we cooperate fully with any investigations and distance ourselves from anyone involved. The implications hit me like a freight train. The company was going to throw me under the bus to protect themselves. Even if we eventually proved Jake's guilt, I'd be the sacrifice offered to salvage their reputation. She's the victim here, Sarah protested. The evidence clearly shows. I don't care what the evidence shows. I care about survival. As of tonight, anyone connected to this scandal is terminated pending investigation. That includes both of you. Sarah's face crumpled. Richard, you can't be serious. Dead serious. Security will escort you both out if you return to the building. Your access is revoked, your company equipment is confiscated, and any public statements will be considered violations of your NDAs. The line went dead, leaving us sitting in stunned silence in the parking garage. Jake had just gotten both Sarah and me fired while positioning himself as the whistleblower who tried to prevent the company's downfall. But the worst part was yet to come. Sarah's phone lit up with a news alert from the local business journal. Marketing executive vanishes as tech company faces espionage scandal. Vanishes. I scrolled through the article with growing horror. According to anonymous sources, I had disappeared from the office during the investigation, potentially fleeing with stolen data. Jake had somehow spun my current absence into evidence that I was guilty and on the run. This is insane, I whispered. How is he still orchestrating this? Where is he? As if summoned by my question, both our phones chimed simultaneously with identical text messages from Jake's number. Check the parking lot level B2. You'll want to see this. Jay. We were on level B2. Sarah and I looked at each other, then slowly turned to scan the dimly lit garage around us. In the far corner, barely visible under a flickering light, a figure emerged from behind a concrete pillar. It wasn't Jake. It was Tom, and he looked absolutely terrified. Tom stumbled toward us like a man in shock, his clothes disheveled and his face pale as paper. Thank God you're both here, he gasped. Jake's completely lost it. He's been setting up everyone who ever crossed him. Tom, what are you doing here? How did you? He never went to the conference room, Tom interrupted, looking over his shoulder frantically. Security thinks they escorted him there, but somehow he slipped away. He's been coordinating everything from his car in the level B3 garage this whole time. Sarah grabbed Tom's arm. What do you mean coordinating everything? The emails, the media leaks, all of it, he's got a whole setup down there. Multiple laptops, backup phones, even a mobile hotspot. He showed me everything. Tom's voice cracked. He wanted me to see what happens to people who betray him. My blood turned to ice. He's still in the building. Level B3. He's been watching you both through the security camera feeds. That's how he knew exactly when to send those texts, when to trigger each media release. Tom pulled out his phone with shaking hands. But I recorded everything. His whole confession about the embezzlement, the blackmail, how he's been planning this for months. Sarah's eyes went wide. You have him on tape admitting to fraud. Better than that. Tom's voice gained strength as he realized what he held. I have him explaining how he manipulated the digital evidence, how he fabricated the corporate espionage story, even how he's been paying former employees to corroborate his lies with journalists. The pieces fell into place with stunning clarity. Jake's network of allies, the perfectly timed media leaks, the professional quality fabricated evidence, it had all been orchestrated by someone with far more resources and planning than one disgruntled employee should have had. Tom, we need that recording, I said urgently. Can you send it right now? Already uploaded to cloud storage with timestamps, he replied, pulling up his phone. But there's more. Jake's about to trigger what he calls the final phase. He's going to release recordings of confidential client meetings, financial documents, even personal information about employees. He wants to destroy the entire company. When? Midnight. He's got everything queued up to automatically send to every tech journalist and competitor on his contact list. I checked my phone, 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes to stop Jake from nuking everyone's careers and livelihoods. Sarah was already dialing. Richard? It's Sarah. Don't hang up, I have proof that everything tonight was fabricated. Yes, I can prove it. Tom has recordings of the real perpetrator confessing to fraud and sabotage. While Sarah rapid-fired explanations to our CEO, I was thinking about Jake's psychology. He'd built his entire scheme on control, controlling information, controlling narratives, controlling people's fears. But now that control was slipping, and cornered predators became desperate. Tom, where exactly is he on B3? Southeast corner, behind the maintenance equipment. But he's got exit strategies planned. Multiple escape routes, a car ready to go. He's not running, I realized aloud. He's staying to watch it all burn down. This is personal now. My phone buzzed with one final text from Jake, 11 minutes left. Hope you enjoyed the preview of your new reality. Jay. I looked at Tom's recording, at Sarah coordinating with legal and executives, at the mountain of evidence we'd assembled. Jake thought he held all the cards, but he'd made one critical error. He'd underestimated the power of the truth when it finally fought back. Sarah, Tom, we're ending this now.